Hey everybody, hello there. Welcome to history class. So, the first time anyone's seeing this recording would be Thursday, April 20th, but this is Unit 11, Lesson number 9, but it is recording number 8, and we are covering Chapter 50 in your textbook during this lesson. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about are just a couple of things. We're focusing still just on the 1960s. We're going to talk about the civil unrest that was going on during this time in the United States, and talk about the different groups that participated in that. I just want to take a minute to remind you, if you haven't taken the Unit 11 quiz, there's probably a reason for that, because before April 19th, I did not realize that the quiz was not open for you. So if you're watching this after April 19th, you should have no problem finding the quiz. It should be open and ready for you to take now. So make sure you do get that quiz done, because it will close before the end of the unit. All right, so what we're going to do is do a little quick recap about what we talked about in our last lesson. And I found this video. It's sort of a little more information than what we covered in class, but I thought it was a good sort of summary of the whole Vietnam War. So the link should pop up in your Edpuzzle for you to watch the video. You can click or pause the recording while you watch the video, and come on back when you are finished. Okay, so that's a quick recap of the Vietnam War, and I want to just remind you again, remember what the Gulf of Tonkin resolution was all about. Basically, it was this event that happened in the Gulf of Tonkin, which later became a little controversial, that sort of kicked off the United States official entry into the Vietnam War. And what it did say was it gave Lyndon Johnson, our president, the power to take all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression. So it was sort of just like this blanket statement that said, okay, Congress approves the United States to go to war in Vietnam. But remember, there was this controversy surrounding this. Did this incident really happen? Did it really happen? Did they think it really happened, or was it completely made up? Did President Johnson lie about it? So this controversy starts to get publicity, and as we talked about in the last class, we know a lot of people were not in favor of the United States entering this war in Vietnam. So now that this whole idea of this Tonkin incident being a lie, it gives a lot more steam to these protests going on in the United States against the war. And in the beginning, President Johnson kept saying that the United States wasn't going to go to war. So he kind of was not really telling the truth about that either, because while he was telling the country that, he was really getting us prepared for war anyway. And another controversy that comes about during this Vietnam War is that all the generals and the people running the military and President Johnson are telling the United States that we're only targeting military targets. Remember when we talked about this when we bombed Hiroshima, and we only went after the army where they made their weapons and where their army headquarters were? Well, that was what they were telling people was also happening in Vietnam. We were not trying to hit innocent people. But with the popularity of TV now, we have television reporters going to the war zones and taking pictures and video that are showing different things than what we are being told. So this again fuels these anti-war protests and gets people, really, 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 really anxious and really, really angry about what's going on. And so this begins a period of what they call civil unrest in the United States, where we have a lot of protesting going on in different places for a lot of reasons. So it kind of all centers around the social change that's going on in the United States at this time. So I want to just take a couple minutes and sort of point these things out to you. Because remember, we talked about at the same time that we're in Vietnam, we still have our civil rights movement going on. We have the African American community gaining more rights as Martin Luther King, fights for equal treatment for all black people. And after that it doesn't really calm down. It just sort of changes a little bit. So remember we talked about how, once the Jim Crow laws were repealed, there were other things that the African American community wanted, and we talked about voting rights and so forth. Well, something else that happens in the black community is blacks start leaving the southern states and moving to the north. One of the reasons for that is the change in farming. In the South, a lot of the industry there is farming industry and particularly cotton. And with the invention of some new farming equipment, there's less people needed for the physical labor in the farms. So a lot of these people in the South, especially black people, lost their jobs. So they decide to start migrating to the northern states. Something else they do is instead of going to other farming communities in the north, the people who leave the southern states decide to settle in urban areas or cities. Okay? And that may not seem like a big deal, but the thing is we'll find out in a minute, the cities weren't necessarily prepared for all these people moving in. So that is two different problems that arise as the change that happens with the black community. Okay, so once there's less to protest for the African American community, some of these civil rights leaders start protesting the war now because they don't have as many issues going on as they did maybe 10 years ago, fighting for the equality of black people. So now they turn to protesting war. And other people that are protesting the war are students. And we see a lot of things like this. If we look at this picture up here, is kids on college campuses are really fired up against this war. So a lot of things happening all over the country for many different reasons. A lot of changes are going on, and it's kind of making things a little hot all over the country. Like there's little problems popping up everywhere, and we're going to see how that causes some problems. So when I was talking about how the black community kind of started moving north and moving into urban areas, because remember, they couldn't go to farming anymore. Farming was becoming industrialized and they didn't need as many people to work on farms. So they moved to cities. But the thing was, the cities were not ready for this total influx of all these new people. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands of people moving into cities. So some of the things, that they weren't prepared to handle were things like transportation and housing and schools. And they didn't have enough policemen or firemen to manage all the people that were now living in places that weren't that populated before in the cities. And people had some trouble finding jobs. So a lot of these African Americans who left the South and left the farming industry, they had no other skills. So a lot of problems came up because of the result of that change. And what happens then is indirectly now, as a result of this, blacks and whites are getting separated again, because the ones who moved to the cities are finding themselves not segregated by law, but because they can't find work and they can't find homes and they don't have transportation or schools to send their children to. So we kind of have this division now happening all over again, but not really on purpose. It just kind of happens. And the cities are not prepared, so as a result, roads aren't taken care of, buildings aren't taken care of, people aren't taken care of. And again, the black community feels like they have been left out, and they start to take matters into their own hands. And what that means is boom, like a volcano eruption. We start seeing many places have a lot of violence going on. And now we're back to the attitude of discrimination with people being separated and things getting violent. So as a result of this violence, we see the introduction of some organized community groups that feel that they don't want to follow the path of Martin Luther King. They don't feel that the peaceful protesting is going to get anything done. So they turn to violence, and they start riots and angry protests in cities all over the country. And there's a period of time where a lot of cities get burned and a lot of people get hurt, and it's not a good thing. So then we have this idea of the difference between civil disobedience and civil unrest. And what I want you to do is just pause the recording for a minute and take a look at these pictures and see what you think the difference is just by looking at the pictures. Okay, so if you were thinking that civil unrest looks sort of chaotic and dangerous and angry, I would agree with that. The civil disobedience is still protesting for a cause or showing that you don't agree with something, but doing it in a good, organized, safe, and peaceful way. So we have this conflict now, even between the protesters, as to what is the right way to get things done. And so what are they protesting? Well, people were protesting all kinds of things in the 1960s, but mostly these are the areas in which they are really passionate about. Discrimination against blacks, equality for women, ending the Vietnam War, and improving our cities in the urban areas, in all of these areas, education, housing, and living conditions. So basically, we want to have a peaceful, equal, free way of life. That's what the protesters are asking for. Okay, so that was a quick chapter 50. So here's what you're going to do now. We do have a graded assignment, 11.09. Make sure you're reading the chapters, guys, because anything I don't cover in the recordings, then you'll pick up in the reading. And grab those study guide questions off of the online school module. You can print them and write out the answers, or you can download them and type in your answers. All of the questions come right from the lessons and right from your reading. So that is going to be it for today. If you have any questions or anything, please email me, and I will see you all later.